Picture yourself stepping into 1965 America, where the world feels comforting, yet completely different from today. Everyday rituals like trading stamps, drive-in dates, and rotary phones have mostly disappeared from modern life. In this episode, we will uncover 12 once routine American behaviors from the 60s that faded so quietly they have become hidden history. You may end up longing for a decade you have never known. Trading stamp obsession, S&H green stamps. In 1960s America, saving trading stamps was not just a hobby, it was practically a second currency. Every supermarket trip, gas fill-up, or department store purchase earned you long strips of sticky green stamps. Families did not just collect them casually, they hoarded them, organized them, and pasted them meticulously into thick reward books that lived in kitchen drawers like treasured heirlooms. Kids helped lick the back of each stamp until the glue taste became a weirdly familiar childhood flavor. Once the books were full, sometimes dozens at a time, the whole family would take a special trip to the redemption center, which felt like walking into a hybrid of a toy store and a department store. You could trade your stamps for toasters, blenders, radios, camping gear, even furniture. Some families saved for months to get a brand new television. Others cashed in stamps for Christmas presents. It was a slow collective ritual that stretched across the entire year, and the excitement of flipping through the catalog to plan what to buy was real. But as credit cards grew, loyalty programs changed, and inflation destroyed the value of stamps. The entire culture vanished almost overnight. Younger generations do not even know what a stamp book is, and the idea of spending hours pasting tiny pieces of paper just to earn a blender sounds absurd today. Yet for families in the 1960s, it was not absurd. It was smart, thrifty, and strangely fun. It was a quiet ritual that glued together both stamps and memories. In the 1960s, drive-ins were not just movie theaters, they were social hubs, teenage hangouts, family bonding spots, and date night central all in one. When the sun went down, cars lined up in long rows, each one pointed at a giant glowing screen rising out of a field. You would hook the little metal speaker onto your window, roll it halfway up, and wait for the previews to begin. The screen crackled, the sound was fuzzy, and mosquitoes buzzed around the headlights. But none of that mattered. The experience was magic. Families brought blankets, pillows, and coolers packed with homemade snacks. Teenagers made excuses to go get popcorn and disappeared for suspiciously long amounts of time. Kids in pajamas hopped between cars, playing tag until the opening credits rolled. Couples carved out their own private world in the back seat, and the smell of buttered popcorn drifted everywhere. Drive-ins were cheap entertainment, often just $1 per car, making them accessible to nearly everyone. Some theaters even showed double features or all-night marathons. In rural towns, the drive-in was the weekend, but by the late 70s and 80s, rising land prices, indoor multiplexes, and daylight saving time slowly killed the trend. Screens were torn down, lots were abandoned, and thousands of drive-ins disappeared without fanfare. For younger generations, the idea of watching a movie in your car feels like a quirky novelty. For 60s-era Americans, it was simply what you did on a Friday night, a glowing piece of Americana that faded quietly into the rearview mirror. Before grocery stores became a one-stop empire, most American families relied on something nearly unimaginable today. In the 1960s, fresh milk was delivered to the doorstep every morning. The milkman was not just a character in old jokes, he was a familiar face who visited several times a week, carrying clinking glass bottles filled with cold, whole milk. Kids woke up to the sound of his truck rumbling down the street, and parents trusted him enough to leave payment in a small metal box outside the door. Milk delivery was not just convenient, it was woven into the rhythm of home life. Empty bottles waited on the porch, like a silent conversation between family and milkman. Sometimes he left extras: cream, butter, cottage cheese, eggs. During hot summers, families rushed to bring the bottles inside before the sun warmed them. In winter, the cream rose to the top and froze, pushing the cardboard cap up like a dairy volcano. The milkman's arrival was such a constant that it became a running gag in pop culture. But behind the jokes was the truth. This was how America got fresh food. Then came supermarkets, cheaper prices, and mass refrigeration. As modern packaging improved and families bought bigger refrigerators, home delivery went from essential to unnecessary almost overnight. By the 1980s, the milkman had nearly vanished, and with him disappeared a slow, personal rhythm of everyday life. Most Americans today have never tasted milk from a glass porch bottle and have no idea how big a part of American culture this simple delivery once was. Imagine picking up your home telephone in the 1960s and hearing a stranger's voice mid-conversation. No, it was not an accident. It was normal life. Party line telephones were shared phone circuits connecting multiple households to the same line. Instead of having your own private phone number, you shared it with 2, 3, sometimes as many as 8 neighbors. When someone else was talking, your phone was essentially busy because technically it was the same phone. You learned patience quickly. The rule was simple. If Mrs. Henderson, 2 houses down, was chatting about her garden for half an hour, you waited until she hung up, calling your aunt or ordering a pizza, not happening until the line was free. But party lines were not just inconvenient, they were unintentionally entertaining. People eavesdropped constantly. Kids picked up the receiver quietly to hear adults whisper gossip, argue with relatives, or discuss community secrets. Teenagers tried to sneak calls while hoping nobody else was listening. Some families became so familiar with their party line neighbors that they recognized voices instantly. In smaller towns, party lines turned into a strange social thread tying households together, whether they wanted it or not. Privacy was non-existent. Embarrassment was common. But for most families, it was simply one more thing that made the 60s feel connected in a way modern life does not. As technology improved, private lines became the standard. By the 1980s, party lines vanished almost entirely. Today, the idea of sharing a phone with strangers feels unthinkable. But for Americans in the 1960s, it was just part of daily life, a quirky communal relic of a slower, simpler time. Smoking everywhere. To understand the 60s, you have to imagine a world where cigarette smoke was not just occasional, it was everywhere. Offices were filled with haze so thick you could practically see it swirling under fluorescent lights. Restaurants had ashtrays on every table. Teachers smoked in the faculty lounge, the smell drifting into the hallways. People lit up at bus stops, grocery stores, sidewalks, doctors' offices, airplanes. Even hospitals had smoking areas. In homes, it was even more common. Coffee tables had ornate ashtrays used constantly. Dinner guests arrived with cigarettes in hand. After meals, lighting up was practically a ritual. Kids sat in the backseat of cars breathing in secondhand smoke with the windows barely cracked. Not because parents did not care, but because they did not know. The dangers were not widely understood, and smoking was marketed as glamorous, sophisticated, even healthy. Doctors endorsed cigarette brands in advertisements. Movie stars puffed away on screen. Teens smoked to look older. Adults smoked because everyone they knew smoked too. Vending machines selling cigarettes sat openly in public spaces, and no identification was required. You could drop a few coins in and walk away with a fresh pack. Smoking was woven into the fabric of social life, business meetings, break rooms, and everyday routines. But as research revealed smoking's deadly effects, attitudes shifted. Bans spread through the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s, pushing cigarettes out of public life entirely. Today, the idea of lighting up in a restaurant or office is almost unbelievable. Yet for anyone who lived through the 60s, the memory is unmistakable. A country wrapped in a constant, casual cloud of smoke. A habit so normal, it took decades to unravel. In the 1960s, hitchhiking was not something reckless teenagers did on a dare. It was a legitimate way to get around. Whether you were a broke college student, a young worker trying to get to another town, or a soldier heading home on leave, sticking your thumb out on the side of the highway was completely normal. Drivers did not see hitchhikers as threats. They saw them as people who simply needed a lift. You would stand on the shoulder of the road, backpack slung over one shoulder, hoping for a car with enough room. Sometimes you waited minutes, sometimes an hour. When a car finally pulled over, it felt like a small victory. You would slide into the front seat, exchange names, maybe share where you were headed and why. People chatted, swapped stories, and learned about strangers' lives. The highway became a place of human connection, something nearly unimaginable today. Hitchhiking was rooted in trust, social openness, and a belief that most people were good. It was cheap, spontaneous, and often adventurous. Some hitchhikers traveled cross-country this way, zigzagging from state to state, purely on kindness. But everything changed in the 1970s and the 1980s as crime rates rose and true crime media exploded. Stories of dangerous encounters spread fear. Parents warned their kids never to accept rides from strangers, and drivers grew hesitant to pick up anyone they did not know. Hitchhiking went from normal to taboo almost overnight. Today, the idea of climbing into a stranger's car is so foreign that we need multi-billion-dollar rideshare apps to facilitate it. But in the 1960s, people did not need apps, just trust, a thumb, and a little faith in others. If you attended any social event in the 1960s, church potluck, birthday party, bridge club, or neighborhood BBQ, you encountered the towering, wiggling spectacle known as the Jell-O salad. They weren't quick desserts. They were culinary architecture. Entire generations mastered the art of suspending fruit, nuts, marshmallows, cheese, cottage cheese, whipped cream, or even vegetables inside shimmering molded gelatin. And then there were aspics, the savory cousin. These were made with clear gelatin packed with olives, celery, tuna, chicken, boiled eggs, even shrimp. They looked like edible time capsules and tasted like, well, opinions vary. But in the 1960s, they were a sign of sophistication. Cookbooks dedicated entire chapters to them. Hostesses competed for the most elaborate design. Mold shapes were a $1 million industry. Domes, rings, fluted towers, and even molded fish shapes. Kids eagerly spooned out the sweet ones, especially lime jello with fruit cocktail, but avoided the aspics with the caution of a bomb squad. Still, these dishes were everywhere. They lined buffet tables. They starred in magazine ads. They symbolized domestic pride and the creativity of the 1960s in the kitchen. Then, almost suddenly, tastes changed. Fresh ingredients became more accessible. Food trends shifted. Aspics fell out of fashion, and Jell-O salads went from centerpiece to punchline. By the 1990s, the entire trend had practically disappeared from American tables. Today, only holiday outliers or retro-themed dinners revive them. But for people who lived through the 1960s, these wiggly creations weren't kitsch. They were culinary culture, a sweet and sometimes strange reminder of post-war optimism and home kitchen innovation. Before fast food chains conquered every corner, the heartbeat of casual dining in the 1960s was the soda fountain. These marble-topped counters sat inside drugstores, five and dime stores, and corner shops. They were social hubs where teenagers flirted over milkshakes, adults grabbed quick lunches, and families stopped for a treat after weekend errands. The clatter of metal shakers, the hiss of soda guns, and the warm smell of grilled burgers created an atmosphere that felt cozy and communal. The menu was simple but iconic. Cherry Cokes made by hand, root beer floats, malted shakes, banana splits, grilled cheese sandwiches, tuna melts, hamburgers, and steaming bowls of soup. Everything felt personalized. The soda jerk knew your order, your family, and your school. Kids perched on swivel stools, spinning until they were dizzy. Adults shared newspapers over black coffee. Teenagers lingered long after finishing a 20-cent Coke. These counters were also snapshots of American culture, sometimes uplifting, sometimes divided. They were places where communities met, talked, laughed, and occasionally clashed during the civil rights era. But by the late 1960s and into the 1970s, big box stores, fast food chains, and self-service supermarkets pushed soda fountains into extinction. Drugstores became pharmacies. Counters were removed. The culture evaporated. Today, only a handful remain, preserved like living museums. For Americans in the 60s, soda fountains were not retro. They were everyday life. The warm, fizzy center of the community where everything tasted better, conversations flowed easier, and life just felt slower. In the 1960s, hearing a knock at the door did not trigger suspicion. It meant a salesman had arrived. Dressed in crisp suits, carrying leather cases, these salespeople traveled from neighborhood to neighborhood, selling everything from vacuum cleaners and cookware to encyclopedias, brushes, sewing machines, even life insurance. They were trained like actors, charismatic, persuasive, and unfailingly polite. Families often welcomed them inside for demonstrations. Vacuum salesmen dumped dirt on carpets to prove suction power. Encyclopedia representatives recited polished pitches about investing in your child's future. Kids watched in awe as kitchen gadgets sliced tomatoes paper thin. Sales calls could last an hour, sometimes longer. And surprisingly, most people did not find it annoying. They found it normal. Entertainment even. Some door-to-door brands became cultural icons. Fuller Brush, Kirby Vacuums, Electrolux, Avon. They were trusted names long before online reviews or big box stores existed. For rural families especially, these visits were a lifeline to products they might never see otherwise. But societal changes slowly killed the door-to-door era. More women joined the workforce, meaning fewer people were home during the day. Shopping malls exploded. Telemarketing replaced physical calls. Security concerns made unannounced knocks unwelcome. By the 1990s, door-to-door selling had all but vanished from mainstream American life. Today, the idea of inviting a stranger in to demonstrate a vacuum cleaner feels unimaginable. But for people in the 1960s, the salesman was not a threat. He was a trusted visitor bringing the latest and greatest right to your living room. In the 1960s, schools taught practical skills that many parents wish existed today. Home economics and shop class were not electives. They were required. Every student, regardless of gender, was exposed to the basics of real-world life. In home economics, kids learned sewing, cooking, budgeting, basic nutrition, ironing, mending clothes, and even how to plan a household menu for a week. Students walked out knowing how to fry an egg, sew on a button, and keep a clean home. Shop class taught the other end of life skills: woodworking, metalwork, drafting, repairs, and tool safety. Students made birdhouses, shelves, lamps, and even small furniture. They learned how to read blueprints and safely operate machines. Most adults today would be terrified to touch. These classes were not just educational, they were empowering. A 14-year-old could sew their own apron and build a functional stool. Parents watched the projects proudly carried home. Some students discovered lifelong careers this way, becoming chefs, mechanics, engineers, and carpenters. But in the late 1970s and 1980s, education shifted toward academics, testing, and college preparation. Funding was cut, equipment aged, liability concerns grew. Home economics and shop quietly faded from schedules, replaced by computer labs and standardized curriculum. Today, many young adults enter the world knowing algebra, but not how to cook pasta. The loss is noticeable. But in the 1960s, schools taught you how to function, not just how to pass exams. And the confidence those classes instilled is something many people still talk about decades later. 11. Slideshows in the living room. Before smartphones, streaming, or even camcorders, families documented life with slide film and shared it with living room slideshows. It was a whole ritual. Dad set up the projector. Mom dimmed the lights. The family gathered on couches, chairs, and the floor while the carousel clicked, projecting large images onto a portable screen or a blank wall. Vacations, birthdays, Christmas mornings, first days of school, pets, new cars, even mundane backyard snapshots. Every moment became larger than life in that warm, slightly dusty glow. The experience was slow and intimate. The projector hummed. The slides made a sharp K chunk as the carousel rotated. People laughed, groaned, and teased each other. Kids fell asleep halfway through. Relatives politely endured the entire Yellowstone series, even if they had seen it twice. But these nights brought families together in a way modern media rarely does. Slide photography required patience. You waited weeks to get the film developed. You organized slides into trays. You labeled boxes. And when company came over, neighbors, grandparents, or visiting friends, the projector reappeared. It was entertainment, storytelling, and social bonding wrapped in one. But technology moved fast. Instant cameras appeared. Video cameras replaced slides. Then digital photography arrived, reducing years of memories into files on a computer. Projectors got shoved into attics and eventually thrown out. Today, the sound of a slide carousel is unfamiliar to most people. But for families in the 60s, that rhythmic clicking was the soundtrack of memory, nostalgia, and togetherness. A simple ritual that made ordinary moments feel cinematic. 12. Rotary phones and a world without instant communication. Before smartphones, before texting, before speed dial or caller ID, Americans in the 1960s lived in a world ruled by the rotary telephone. These heavy, indestructible devices sat in kitchens, hallways, and living rooms like loyal appliances, permanently anchored to the wall or perched on a small telephone table. To make a call, you did not tap a screen. You did not press a button. You slipped your finger into a numbered hole and rotated the dial clockwise for each digit, listening to the mechanical whir and the satisfying click, click, click as it returned to place. Calling someone was a commitment. Dialing a number with lots of nines or zeros felt like a workout. And if you messed up a digit, you had to start all over again from scratch. Calling long distance required speaking to an operator first. Phone cords coiled and tangled into knots, stretching across the room as teenagers tried to have private conversations, only to have parents tug the cord or pick up another extension to eavesdrop. Privacy on the phone was a luxury almost no one had. Missed calls did not exist. If someone did not answer, you simply tried again later. No voicemail, no text follow-up, no typing dots or instant replies. Conversations happened in real time, or not at all. And when the phone rang, the entire house heard it, a sharp metallic bell that demanded immediate attention. As the decades passed, push-button phones replaced rotary dials. Then came cordless phones, then digital messaging. And now, instant communication is so normal that the idea of waiting days to reconnect feels ancient. But for Americans in the 1960s, the rotary phone was not an inconvenience. It was the center of home communication. It forced patience, presence, and a slower pace of life that today's world barely remembers. If any of these 60s habits made you smile, cringe, or whisper, "I remember that," then you are exactly who this channel is for. Hit subscribe like you are stamping another page in a green stamp book, and ring the bell so these lost pieces of history do not disappear from your feed too. In the comments, tell me which 60s habit you would bring back for one day: drive-ins, milkmen, or something I missed. Your answer might become its own episode.